And we're live. Happy Thursday, everybody.
Happy Thursday.
Great to be here with you all. We have a very special conversation today. I've been waiting for this one for a while. None other than my dear friend Abood Cohen, who is one of the remaining 840 Samaritans alive today. Today we're going to take a deep dive into who the Samaritans are, who Abood Cohen is. It's going to be a conversation between him and I, but we will take it to audience questions as always, so stay tuned for that. Before we get started, a quick shout out to our Patreon visionary members. We have Trivium Energy Pty Ltd, SOG Cannabis, Max Marine, Geffen Posner, Adam Becker, Maya, Kimberly, and our one and only champion member, Rajia. That list is getting longer to say, and I'm pleased that's the case. Exactly. Okay, look, Abood, let's get started. It's great to have you here.
Thank you.
I guess let's start with, who are the Samaritans?
Sure. So I think if you ask anyone on the street in like around the world, America, Europe, especially these kind of regions, have you ever heard about the word Samaritan? They would probably say, oh yeah, like the Good Samaritan, you know? And usually they mean by that the guy or like this random stranger who helps another person on the street randomly that he doesn't know. So they say, oh, it's a Good Samaritan act. But 99.9999% of those people who would know about that term, they also probably never heard about what's behind the story, the real story of this Good Samaritan. And really what's behind the story is, this is a story by, like it mentioned in the Bible, Jesus talks about it, or like Jesus gives like a parable about a Samaritan who helped an injured Jewish person on the street or on the way from Jericho to Jerusalem. And he used the example of the Samaritan because 2,000 years ago, the Samaritans and the Jews, 3,000 years ago, the Samaritans and the Jews were split from one Israelite kingdom to two kingdoms, the one in the north, the one in the south, Samaria and Judea, and they often fought each other. So Jesus used this example as, hey, here's a Samaritan who actually helped a Jewish person who they were enemies anyway, but he helped him anyway. So today, this term is used, like I said, for anyone who is who helps a person on the street, and also for even in laws in the court that are called the Good Samaritan law, where if you like injure someone accidentally, if you wanted to help him who he was already injured, but you made his situation worse, they will protect you in the court by this Good Samaritan law. But really, we consider ourselves, sometimes people ask us, so what are you? Are you a Muslim? Are you a Samaritan? Your name is Abdallah, but your last name is Cohen. What are you? So we are not Muslims, and we're not Jewish. We're not Christian. Although sometimes I get asked this question, are you Jewish? And it kind of intrigues me, because then what do you mean by Jewish? Because today the word Jewish is given to anyone who kind of believes in the Torah, or his mother is Jewish, you know, although we get to ask the question again, who is Jewish or who is not. So I think the best way to define Samaritans is that we believe we are descendants of the northern kingdom of Israel that existed 3,000 years ago. After the Israelites split, there were what we believe there were like 10 tribes who remained in the northern tribe, that was called the Kingdom of Israel, later called Samaria, and there was 2 tribes and a half that went to the south, which were the kingdom of the tribe of Judah, Benjamin, and also half of the tribe of Levi. This is why it was called the Kingdom of Judah, because the biggest tribes were, or the majority was from the tribe of Judah. Now, the term Samaritan comes from Shomer, Shomrim. We believe we're like the keepers, we can say. Shomrim means keepers in Hebrew, and we also believe we are descendants. What remained of the Samaritans today, we are from the tribe of Ephraim, Menashe, who were the sons of Joseph, and Levi. Like my last name is Cohen, so I'm considered from Levi, the Levi tribe. Now, we will not dive deep into why the split happened, but I do think it's important to touch on it a little bit, and at least in our perspective, because in the Jewish world, especially in the Orthodox world, they do not believe that we Samaritans are really Israelites. Okay, they believe that we were some kind of a the Assyrians controlled the north around 2,000 years ago or something like that. So nations used to have this method of when they want to weaken the nation that is inside the land, they would necessarily like just take the higher status people, the higher, how do you say, like hierarchy in the top hierarchy of society. They would take them out and then bring them, like replace them with people from outside. You can read about it, the Assyrian conquering the northern tribes of Israel. So they say there were 27,000 that were exiled from that time. And we believe 27,000 is a really small number compared to the 1.5 million Samaritans that existed after the split of the Israelites happened. And the split happened really because what we believe was differences in, it started really with differences between who should be the high priest. So there was Uzi and Eli. Uzi was really in the northern tribes, and Eli saw that Uzi was not fit for the position to be a high priest. So he eventually, Eli eventually said, okay, I don't want anything to do with it. I want to take my own kind of temple, Mishkan, and build it elsewhere other than Mount Gerizim, which was against the Samaritan belief or the northern Israelites' belief. We believe that from the beginning, when Joshua entered the land, he built the Mishkan, or the Temple of Moses, on Har Gerizim. Really, the first year when the Israelites entered the Holy Land, 6 stood on Mount Gerizim, 6 stood on Mount Ebal. This is mentioned in both the Samaritan and Jewish Torah. And the ones who are on Mount Gerizim, each of them representing each tribe, Shemun, Levi, Yehuda, Shishkar, and then like Zebul, and then spread. The ones on Mount Gerizim pronounce the blessings. The ones on Mount Ebal pronounce the cursings. And that's, like I said, Eli and Uzi, they were like split, and now we have two beliefs. We have the same Torah, but we have kind of differences between where should the temple be built. And then eventually we have changes in the Torah. Now, we will not dive deep into where or why. I mean, we can soon, but like, let's begin by just reminding you that there are some differences between the Samaritan Torah and the Jewish Torah. Almost 6,000 small differences, 30 of which are important differences. When I say 6,000 differences, you should know that we Samaritans we still use the ancient Hebrew, which is kind of like the oldest version that is used really in the world today. It's not necessarily what the Israelites have used. It has evolved a little bit. It's known as also Paleo-Hebrew, which some connected to Phoenician or Aramaic. And the Jewish people today, they use Assyrian Hebrew, which they started using when, if you heard about Azrei Hasofer, one of the Jewish rabbis, he gave them to the Jewish people to the Assyrian Hebrew to use, and left the ancient Hebrew for like what he said, the Kutim, or what is another rabbi who said the Kutim. So Kutim means the people who came from Kuta, Iraq. That's where some people believe the Samaritans like originally are from, right? So yeah, we believe that 3,000 years ago we were, well, not we, but like researchers also believe that their Samaritans number were about 1.5 million. And eventually we were not as much exiled as the Jewish people. We didn't have a Roman exile. We didn't have pretty much a Babylonian exile. We stayed in the land. We had small exiles here and there, but we mainly stayed in the land. And that meant that we faced many nations that came to control the land, and we fell under many horrible conquerors, especially the Byzantines. They were not really friendly with the Samaritans. We kind of did 3 revolutions against them. This revolution was led by a leader whose name is Baba Rabba, Samaritan leader, Baba Rabba. He led this revolution 3 times, and then the first 1 and 2 were pretty successful. They kind of showed the Byzantines the power and like the willingness of the Samaritans to stay on Mount Gerizim, because that's really the main reason. They didn't want to leave Mount Gerizim. It's so holy for them. It's like as much as Jerusalem is for the Jewish people. And the third revolution kind of were the hardest on the Samaritans and killed over half of the population. And eventually, the population declined. Conversion to other religions happened. Maybe other exiles happened. And eventually our numbers 100 years ago, there was a researcher from America who came, and he counted how many Samaritans were there at that time, how many males, how many females. He came at a Passover ceremony, so he also counted how many sheep. And we had like 6 sheep at that time and 140 Samaritans doing the Passover ceremony in 1917, I believe. 149 even, 147, if I'm correct. His correct research. I forgot the name of that researcher, but so that's really one of the lowest recorded numbers of the Samaritans. And we don't know if there are any around the world, simply because no one came to us and told us, hey, we are Samaritans, we have the Torah, we have ancient Hebrew, we believe in Mount Gerizim. You see? So I think this would be like briefly a little bit about our origins. Hope that kind of gives you a tip of the rope to start from there.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. And I actually just today, doing some research for, before a conversation, I discovered the origins of the Good Samaritan. I found it to be fascinating. I want to talk to you more about your personal identity and the identities of Samaritans. So there's an estimated 840 somewhat.
Today there's 840, yeah. So today, after 100 years of 1917, we increased from 147 to 840, which I believe is a pretty nice increase.
A great comeback. Yep.
Yeah, although the number is increasing slowly now, slower than before. I guess it's because families are bringing like maybe 2 or 3 children, not more. So
I do want to talk to you about population numbers, but maybe we'll get to that after identity.
Sure.
So there's currently 2 distinct groups of Samaritans, right? One lives in Holon, which is a city next to Tel Aviv, and the other live in Mount Gerizim, which is where you live.
True. So basically, around 1930, there was a family that lived in Nablus. There was like all of the families lived in Nablus. All the Samaritans lived in Nablus up to 1930, 1935. The economic situation forced us to find some, jobs, like whether if it's from Jaffa or Haifa or like all around the Holy Land. And eventually, one family found a job in Jaffa. They moved there. And slowly, another family saw that that family is, better off living there a little bit because financially it's much better than Shechem, where the Samaritans lived. So now we kind of have those people who are living there that are doing pretty good over there. And slowly, Yitzhak Ben Zvi, who was the prime minister at that time, he was fascinated by the Samaritans, and he even wrote a book about us. You can check out, search. I don't know what the exact book, but search for Yitzhak Ben Zvi, Samaritans. In Shomronim, in Hebrew. I don't think it was translated to English yet, maybe. And he eventually, he visited the Samaritans. He visited the high priest over there. I believe 1950 that happened, something like that. I'm not sure about the numbers. Should check them. But eventually he gave them the Israeli ID that really, really helped push their financial status, their ability to go freely from Har Gerizim to back from Cholon. Eventually, he helped us also. He helped the Samaritans who lived in Jaffa buy lands in Cholon to kind of like even sell a little bit closer to the mountain, but also like have their own community there. And there was still Samaritans living in Shechem, in Nablus. And eventually, the Samaritans who lived in Nablus moved from Nablus to Har Gerizim, to the top of Mount Gerizim, because they used to only go to Har Gerizim when there were like festivals and ceremonies and holidays. It was a super important place, but we never lived there. I mean, Samaritans did live there. There was up to 10,000 people, 10,000 Samaritans living there 2,000 years ago, in the Hellenistic period even. That was like 1,500 years ago. But up to like 60 years ago, there was no one living on Har Gerizim. So eventually, we have the 2 groups meeting today only on ceremonies and holidays. At some points, the Samaritans in Nablus were not allowed to visit the ones in Tel Aviv because they didn't have the Israeli ID. And they asked, I believe, the prime minister or like the Israeli government if they could have the Israeli ID because that would help them financially, that would help them also meet their relatives. I have, for example, 2 relatives. I have 2 aunts that live there. And the ones who were in Holon, in Tel Aviv, they were at some point, like I think 4 years or 3 years, they were not allowed to come to Har Gerizim, and that was super hard for them. Imagine being Jewish and not being able to access the Western Wall, for example, right? So that was really hard for them. So eventually they were freed, and now Samaritans are considered like especially like the ones who live on Har Gerizim, like me. We have like a lot of freedom to go all over the Palestinian cities and the Israeli cities, and even in Jordan. I have Israeli passport, Palestinian ID, Jordanian passport. I have the 3. Some have, I believe, some can have 4 now because they married Ukrainians. Did that work? Maybe.
Interesting.
So
just for some clarity, Har Gerizim, and for those who don't know, Har means mountain in Hebrew. Perhaps
right.
Arabic as well. Is that
Har Jebel Gerizim in Arabic? Yeah.
Okay.
Gerizim, this kind of sounds the same.
Yeah. So that would be what Jerusalem is to us. Har Gerizim would be to Samaritans.
Yes. And what I mean by that?
In terms of its religious significance.
Yes, that's one. And also in terms of the stories that happened in the Torah. For example, when God told Abraham in Genesis that go to the mountain that I will show you. In ancient Hebrew, we say, go to the mountain, to one of the mountains that I will show you. We believe that this was Mount Gerizim. And when Jacob, the prophet Jacob, came to a place called Kiryat Luza, he slept on one of the rocks over there, and he had a dream, he had a vision of a ladder, famous known story of the ladder touching from earth to the sky, and he woke up from the dream and he said, which means this must be the house of God, this must be the gates of heaven. So these are like 2 other names that we use for Mount Gerizim. And we have other stories that really signifies Mount Gerizim and why it's really important. So we have like 12 names also for Mount Gerizim. And by the way, Mount Gerizim, it's interpreted, the word Gerizim is interpreted by many researchers and many people to be the mountain of commandments. That's what Hegzarim mean, but it's just really kind of the same context. Hegzarim, Gerizim, it means the mountain of commandments. So that's also one of the main differences of the 10 commandments. So the 10 commandments, what is the first and the second one in the Jewish Torah? So Jewish 10 commandments. It's the first one is I am the Lord your God. The second one is you shall have no other God before me. I mean, that's what I believe in the Jewish world. They're interpreted as 2 separate ones, but in the community Samaritan traditions, it's considered as the one and the same. I'm the Lord your God. You shall have no other God before me is considered the same. So for us, we have this. You might think we have 9, but we actually have a 10th commandment, which talks about Mount Gerizim. Holiness of Mount Gerizim and the commandment to build an altar on Mount Gerizim.
Interesting.
And yes, and there's also a verse that says, "You shall put the blessings on Mount Gerizim and the curses on Mount Ebal." This is mentioned in both Samaritan version of the Torah and the Masoretic text, which is the Jewish version of the Torah.
So I want to go a little bit deeper into identity. So as you mentioned, all Samaritans today have an Israeli citizenship, whether living in Holon or Har Gerizim.
True.
There's Israeli citizenships. Are there still differences, though, in how both groups of Samaritans identify because of where they live, one being Israel proper, the other being the West Bank?
So I think this is a common question I get asked, whether like, do you feel you're Israeli more or you're Palestinian more, having lived
That's what I'm getting at. Yeah.
Nablus, right? So you should really, first of all, remember that Samaritans who live in Nablus or like on Har Gerizim, I say Nablus because it's kind of considered part of Nablus because it's 5 minutes away. So the ones who live in Har Gerizim, like me, we interacted with the Palestinians throughout our years more. Naturally, because we're closer, we go to their schools. We have many friends. I go to Nablus almost every day. I have really, really good friends who live there. So we are exposed to their culture more. We are invited to their parties and ceremonies often. but also we also go to work in Israel. We have a lot of Israeli friends. I'm talking about the Samaritans who live in Har Gerizim. So we're also affected by the Israeli culture, but not as much as the Palestinian culture, I would say, because we are, like I said, closer. So going back to the Israeli, to the Samaritans who live in Israel, I wanted to say the Israeli Samaritans, although again, it's arguable to call them the Israeli Samaritans. Some people might call them that. They are affected more by the Israeli culture, obviously, and they learn Hebrew. They speak Hebrew as a first language. By the way, we speak Arabic. The ones on Har Gerizim, we speak Arabic as a first language. We don't use ancient Hebrew in our daily life, only in the religious ceremonies and holidays. So the ones who are in Cholon in Israel, they use Hebrew. They go to Israeli schools. Some even serve as like governmental service in the IDF, and it's mandatory. The ones who are in Har Gerizim, even though if you have the Israeli ID, pretty much you have to go to go to the IDF. But the ones who are in Har Gerizim, we do not go to the IDF for some reasons that you might understand, because it's really complicated, and we really want to form a bridge of peace between the two nations. We don't feel like we have to kind of like root for this country or root for this country. We're very, very small, and at some points we have to admit we're selfish. We're a selfish community that wants to survive, and if this nation gives us benefits, naturally, not only about benefits, of course, we have historical roots with the Jewish people to this land. That's of course going to give us more connection to the Jewish people, but also with the Palestinians, because we lived in Nablus with the Palestinians for at least 1,000 years or 1,400 years or something like that. So we have their food. So we are very much blended in both nations, to the point where I can tell you that we are both Palestinians and Israelis, and neither at the same time. I mean, I don't know if you could catch that, what I mean by that, but if I can give a few words, what do I mean by neither? It's just that we don't forget that we're Samaritans also. Like, we grow up living in both nations. I go both from a Palestinian city to an Israeli city in like just sometimes in 15 minutes. Like from Nablus to Ariel, which is an Israeli city settlement. It's becoming a city, by the way. It's really big in Ariel. Maybe you saw it. It's like 15 minutes only. So we have a switch of the world just like that. And some people just don't realize how close are we and how blended are we to both nations, to the point where we really can't say that we're only this or only that. You see? I can really go on and talk about the differences.
So I find that fascinating. Is that a common sentiment amongst Samaritans, that they really view themselves as one's position to help be the bridge between Israelis and Palestinians? Did they assume the role of peacemaker in how they view the conflict?
Here's the thing. I don't know if we assume the role, but the role is sometimes forced upon us. And I would say not only forced, but we also appreciate being able to do it. Because, for example, if you come to the Passover ceremony, which is like the only sacrifice, the animal sacrifice that we do throughout the year, because there's no Mishkan, but the Passover ceremony doesn't require. So we invite, like important people from both nations, like the Palestinian leaders and the Israeli leaders. We invite them to attend because it's like a historical ceremony, and people want to get along and watch it. So this is one of the only ceremonies in the Holy Land where you can see both Palestinians and Israelis just watching this really ancient ceremony together, that they kind of might interact. And the place itself, Har Gerizim, is politically accessible for both Israelis and Palestinians. So if you come as an Israeli and you see a Palestinian car, like Israeli Palestinian license plate, don't be surprised. You're actually allowed also to be here, and he's allowed to be here without any problems at all, because it's one of the few places where it's considered Area B, because it's really, I think it's because there's no borders. There's too close, too complicated to cut it out, something like that. We have, so you come here and you would see Israelis and Palestinians buying from the same store. We have a store here that sells like also alcohol. So a lot of Palestinians come to buy alcohol from Nablus because they want to like just make a shortcut, not to go to Tulkarem. Instead of 50 minutes, boom, go to the Samaritans, they tell you. And we even have a mail that kind of brings the speediness of Israeli mail to the Palestinians, because we can do that. We can bring Israeli mail and we can bring it to the Palestinian cities. So it's a cool project my brother started, actually. And it's working pretty well. So you can see we are a link. You can say we are a bridge. Is it a bridge of peace? You can say yes. You can definitely say yes. It's a lot of people ask me, hey, we have this workshop, but we heard that we can bring Palestinians and Israelis to your place. You see, Palestinians cannot access Israeli cities and vice versa. So An Gerizim is definitely a bridge of peace, a place that you can bring together both nations.
I love hearing that. Yeah. Is there like a specific solution that is commonly accepted among the Samaritans? Like, would they prefer a one-state solution or a two-state solution? Are there conversations of this?
There are, not as much as you might think, but I think that I never heard about a one-state solution by a Samaritan. I might have, but if I had to guess, I don't think a one-state solution. Like, I personally don't know if a one-state solution is possible, because I know how Israelis are attached to their land, and I know how Palestinians are attached to their land. And if you tell them, hey, would you like how about we give you all the benefits that we have, but let's just call it Israel, and let's just leave the Palestinian identity and just leave it, let's just call it one state solution. We're friends, but let's just call it one state solution. I don't think that's going to happen. And the reason is because I lived and I studied in Israel, in Palestinian schools for many years. They grow up also. It's sometimes easy to take for granted how much a person, like your enemy, also loves his land. I mean, I said enemy because, there might be some people who consider the other side enemies, and they just don't know that, hey, as much as you love your land, the guy over there also loves his land. So he's not willing to kind of easily, even if you represent historical facts from each sides, you're always going to be biased towards your nation. And, growing up there, I just realized that I don't think one state solution is that easy to make. It might be if there are some ways that we can make both people happy and not lose their identity and kind of respect both people's history and culture. A two-state solution is also not, I can imagine, not that easy to make. But if you look at it closely, we kind of have it going on, although not officially. We do have Palestinian cities, we do have Israeli cities. There's no specific 100% borders. But then we bring up the settlement problem. That we, like people will tell you, but what about the settlements? So I really don't have an exact opinion about the settlements, but I would say that we have a settlement like near us here on Har Bracha. It's like just a kilometer away. There are some pretty nice people over there. I have like really good friends there, and we have some benefits of like having medical centers. Although the question would be, it's expanding at a pretty fast rate. So if it reaches our village, right, that's like where we have to know how are we going to be blending in with that community. They're getting closer. I don't think there's a lot of information on us in that settlement, but so you can see why it's
right. So do you identify as Palestinian?
Do I identify as Palestinian?
Like, do you consider yourself to be a Palestinian Samaritan? Like,
do I consider myself to be a Palestinian Samaritan? Well, I've been asked this question before, but I just like to ask myself again and see what I feel about this question, right?
It could change from day to day.
It can change, and it could just also, I just like to ask myself again to just give you a really authentic answer. And now that I look on the left side of I think I have it here, I have a Palestinian ID. Does that make me a Palestinian? If you say no, and you say like technical things don't matter, what do you feel inside? I say that I have studied the Palestinian history. It's in school, and it doesn't matter if you believe it's right or wrong. It's just that I have some attachment to it. I have a lot of Palestinian friends, like I said. Their food is amazing, and and I've studied with what they teach at schools. So I do have Palestinian, not ethnically. You can't say I'm ethnically Palestinian. I mean, DNA wise, maybe if you want to go that far into ethnicity, we're not Palestinians. But here's the thing: I have a question for you, Adar. Did you make Aliyah?
Mm-hmm.
Where from?
Yep. New Jersey.
So are you American?
I consider myself American, but I consider myself to be Israeli American.
Okay, interesting. So what made you American? Was it because you were born there, or was it because, right? So
yeah, probably I was born there, lived there for a little more than half my life. Yeah.
Sure, but that's what happened with me. I lived in Nablus, and people called it Palestine. It doesn't matter what it's officially called, and like that's what people don't get. One time I was in my documentary was viewed in New York. You can search for it, Samaritan 2008 on YouTube, or search for Abood Cohen if you want to watch it. And at some point in the film, I say that we lived with the many nations, including. And I say including in Palestine. Now, I sometimes say Israel. I sometimes say Palestine. Sometimes it depends on who I'm talking with. Sometimes I just want to get a point out. It doesn't really matter. What do I call it? Although some people say it does matter. Some people don't like when I say Palestine. And apparently one of the audience who was watching it, he heard that I said Palestine. And after the movie, he said, excuse me, really nice movie, but you do know, there's no such thing called Palestine. The Romans called it Palestine, so they could be against the Jews. And then there was a pro-Palestinian who was next to me, and they went on each other, And I was like, guys, relax. We're here to make peace, or something like that. But I don't want to go off course a little bit. I just want to give a small example that you can't say we're completely Palestinian Samaritans. You just can't say that 100%. Because we have also a huge connection with the Jewish people in Israel. And that makes us also Israelis. And we have the Israeli ID, and we work in Israel, and we have, like I said, many Israeli friends. So we're like Palestinian Israeli Samaritans, maybe something like that. You see, I can come up with 100% answer.
I like that, Palestinian Israeli Samaritans. It works. That's taking the role of peacemaker right there.
Right. If you have to look for an identity somewhere, maybe that's what I can come up with. But we have, like I said, we are blended with both worlds so much that we can't say we're 100% this and 100% that.
Interesting. And would you say that the reason why the national identity, you're saying it exists to an extent, but it seems like Samaritans have a less strong sense of a Palestinian national identity than most other inhabitants of the West Bank. And is that because potentially you've already had a very strong and historic Samaritan identity that there was less room for a strong sense of Palestinian nationalism to develop? Do you think it has something to do with that?
I think it probably does, but if you look at it also from the other side, the Samaritan identity, us being Samaritans, again, what does it mean? What does the word Samaritan mean? It means keepers. And we are very, very attached to the Samaritan religion, the Samaritan story, the history, especially, I believe, when you're that much of a minority. When you're a very small minority, I think people don't realize how much you can be what's the right word? You're just very, you want to keep this kind of link alive.
How it solidifies and strengthens your identity when you're
100%. Yeah, a lot of people take that for granted. And I think that, to answer your questions, what makes us not blend, maybe it was just us being a minority. And sometimes some people, I remember this question in school, that not a question, but just a statement by a teacher who said to the students, guys, there's no differences between Samaritans and Muslims. And there was this one student who said, you're right. Yeah, there's no differences between Samaritans and Muslims. You see what he did there? Playing with words. He's saying just talking about it kind of implies there is a difference. So being a minority over there kind of also reminds you in a sense, there's some differences between you and the other communities. Although sometimes I forget I'm a Samaritan. I'm reminded when I'm about to enter a restaurant or something. There's like some kosher rules or some. Or like some Samaritan guys, I would assume they are reminded if they're single and they find this women whom they might love or men, they might be reminded, oh, I'm a Samaritan and she has to convert if I want to marry her. So,
So what language did you grow up speaking?
We speak Arabic in Har Gerizim, and the ones who live in Cholon, they speak Hebrew. We speak Arabic because, like there are some Jewish people who were like living in or were exiled in Europe and a lot in America. They started speaking in whatever country they grew up in, right? So they speak French if they lived in France, German, or Germany, they live in Germany, and all those examples. But they didn't forget their Hebrew, right? They can still speak, they can read Hebrew, even though their first language might be German or French or Spanish or anything like that. So that's what happened with the Samaritans, really. We just started speaking Arabic because of how long we lived in Shem, in Nablus. And we can even see that with the Samaritans who live in Cholon now. They lived in Israeli cities long enough they didn't lose their Arabic even. They didn't lose their Hebrew, ancient Hebrew, but they started speaking a modern Hebrew.
So do you speak modern Hebrew?
Yeah, I speak pretty fluent modern Hebrew. I mean,
so that you just learned as more so as an adult.
Yeah, I personally learned it because I was an English teacher for Israeli students, so that kind of made it much better. But you also learn it as you go to Israeli cities. You have, like I said, Samaritans, relatives living there, so you go there, you interact with them, so your Hebrew naturally gets better.
Right. So I guess that responds to Rashi's question. Rashi's an audience member that asked, "How is your English so perfect?" So you were an English teacher. Makes sense.
Yeah, that's one thing. But I used to watch a lot of American cartoons when I was a kid. I think that's how it started. And and I'm a tour guide, so a lot of chats with foreign people, and then eventually I started thinking in English. So I think my Arabic needs to be
some fine tuning. Yeah, we could work on it. Is there any difference in terms of like dialect, slang, or accent between the Arabic that you speak and Arabic that other Palestinians speak? I know that there's different accents from city to city. So,
yeah, cool question. There is slight differences, although they can sometimes make you feel a little bit embarrassed because so they call our accent, the Samaritan accent of Arabic, they call it the Nablusi accent, Arabic Nablusi, they say. So, for example, instead of ana, which means me, they say ani. Ironically, this is closer to Hebrew because in Hebrew you say ani, but in the Samaritan or like in the Nablusian ones, only Samaritans use it. Some families in Nablus still use it, but only Samaritans have kept this Nablusian accent. So ani, achi, what words would other words I can give would be like if you want to say why did you do that, you can say lesh hek in the Nablusian accent today, but you would say lesh heke in the Samaritan Hebrew. So they would kind of make fun of us in some terms because it sounds like a little bit too nice, or like a little bit too how can I say, not childish, but like too light, like a language that is too fluffy,
Interesting.
So, but although we speak together, we just forget about it when we Samaritans we speak together, we just speak that our own Samaritan Arabic. But when we talk with the Samaritans with the Nablusians, it's more respectful to switch accents. So you do it subconsciously.
So. Yeah, the different dialects of Arabic is fascinating.
Yeah,
I guess I see it firsthand in English how there's so much diversity within one language. But when I was recently in Dubai, I met with a Palestinian friend there, and he told me that the Emiratis consider Palestinian Arabic to be sissy-like.
Yeah, that's the thing.
And sissy-like, and that some words are different. Like Palestinian Arabic uses some Aramaic. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I can see some examples like that.
What so you mentioned you celebrate Passover,
right?
but it's not during the Jewish Passover. It's a few weeks later. I remember this because you and I met in person once,
Mm-hmm.
and you weren't eating bread then because it was Samaritan Passover,
Right.
but it wasn't
Right.
during our Passover.
Yeah, you're right. So we
So
have it. Sometimes it's different dates. Yeah.
is it based off a different calendar? And in general, are the Samaritan, like, which holidays are aligned? Do you have any holidays that are uniquely Samaritan that no one else celebrates?
So we have the Torah. So we have the first 5 books only, and that means we celebrate the festivals mentioned in the Torah. So that includes Rosh Hashanah, and also the first day of the year. So we have our own calendar. This year is 3,659 since the Israelites' entry to the Holy Land. So that's our calendar today. And we have the Passover ceremony 14 days after the first day. Then we start counting 50 days after the Shabbat. So Me'acheret Shabbat, they say. So in Judaism, that's the difference. They start counting from the day of the Passover, or like one day of the Passover. We start counting from the Shabbat after the Passover. So that makes some days difference already. So we have count 50 days for the Shavuot festival, where we have also a pilgrimage. We have three pilgrimages each year, 3 pilgrimages. And we don't have Hanukkah and Purim, by the way. We do have Yom Kippur fasting day, and we have the Sukkot festival. We also have Rosh Hashanah festival, which is the 7th month of the year. So a lot of people really don't realize how similar we are and how similar our festivals are. Although the way that we celebrate them might be different. Have you ever seen a Samaritan Sukkah?
I actually just today on my little research to get prepared, but we could
Okay.
show a picture.
Sure, I can
You
share
have one?
some. I think, yeah, I do. You can share this one. Let me share it here. There we go. Do you see it? So this one was
Cool.
at my grandfather's. You can see
Wow.
some people make different shapes. The idea is, or the most important thing is to put the lemons and the etrogs and the pomegranates. And other than that, you can do whatever like shape or anything you want. And we sit under, oh, look at that. I think that's a bell. Some people
Nice.
take it to extremes. Some people even made the WhatsApp logo. They thought it was interesting. So there's like, I don't know what that is. I think it's Israeli Brazilian flag. But it's really amazing to make. It brings the family together, and it smells incredible too. It's really good. It's a really good smell. We don't throw anything away, actually. Just after 7 days, we make juice out of what we can make juice out of. And even, like, for example, the one in the middle is called the etrog. We make some really delicious jam from it with sugar. So, yeah, it's pretty
Amazing.
It's one of my favorite festivals.
If you decide to invite me to the next Samaritan Sukkot,
you're more than welcome. It's in October, so yeah.
Okay, coming up.
Although if one fruit falls on you, you're considered lucky and you might get a pride. That's one of the superstitions.
Interesting. I like to think that I'm like pretty high in luck. Like that's one of my better.
Well, you don't want the middle fruit to fall on you because that's pretty heavy. Because one time I was sleeping and I heard something crash. Apparently, the middle fruit hit the table under it and broke the glass at like 3 a.m. at night. That doesn't happen often, but in this festival, in the 7 days festival, you would, well, while you're sleeping, you would hear a fruit or two flying at night, going down at night.
That's funny. Okay. I want to talk more about like demographics, numbers. So you said Samaritans at one point hit a low of 100 and something. What year was that?
147 is what this Western researcher calculated. But there's even stories that it was even less than that. It was like 80. But that's because that was in 1850, 1860. Some people say like that. But that was because they didn't made contact with another Samaritan group that was alive that they were not aware of. That was in Gaza. And slowly the ones who are in Gaza kind of discovered there was a big, like, imagine imagine you're like there's I don't know 100 or 50 of a nation left, and then they discover there's another 100 or another 50. That's a big thing. That's what happened with the
Right.
Samaritans. And they moved to Nablus. I'm not aware of the full story, but I think it's a pretty backed story. And they started living in I think it was 40, the family of 40 living in Gaza, something like that. And they slowly went to live in the old city of Nablus. But yeah, in terms of numbers, we're growing now. We're 840.
Was there like a conscious effort to increase numbers? Like, was there a conversation that said, "Look, we're really small. We're at risk of becoming an extinct people. We need to do something about it"?
There might have, actually, but I'm not aware of any. I mean, it might be something that is you don't even have to say it because people realize it. The people just automatically realize, hey, everyone, when you get married, you just expect it to bring kids, even because it's kind of like this role that you can help with, right? To kind of increase the community. We never had an official talk. Maybe we should, actually. Who knows? And again, maybe there has been. That's a good question. I will ask about it. But as far as I know,
something that's very much part of the culture today, where you just see where like there's a recognition that we need to have as many children as possible to increase our numbers. You're saying it's not like an explicit part of like the culture.
No, it's something that people are aware of. It's definitely something that people are aware of. Like, oh, when a baby comes, everyone's like, oh yeah, nice, we're increasing. Although when a baby girl comes, even we're more than happy because we have lack of. Well, we used to have more men than women. Like 100 years ago, it was up to like two men to each woman. Like
how did that happen? Is there any theories as to how?
I never read any theory, but I think the reason is simple. So when you're down to only 100 or 140, what guarantees that what's left of you is going to be 50% men and 50% women? Nothing guarantees that, right? You're just 140. It happened that this family and that family kind of like converted to other religions, or maybe this family got killed in the war, and then now we have the families who have more men and the families who have more women. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and that's what I assume happened. And eventually, if like lucky for us today, it's kind of like catching up. So we have almost the same. So
right, like the smaller the amount, the easier it is to have a discrepancy between populations.
that's what I mean, exactly.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense.
Oh yeah, and that's important for a lot of people to understand, because I did see some comments on the internet a few times that, oh, that's because they don't let the female babies live. I don't know how did they come up with that.
That's messed up.
But no, that's
sounds almost like blood libel.
Yeah. So
wow. Okay.
But like when a baby boy also gets born, there's like a huge brit milah, the circumcision ritual. Like everyone is invited for this morning ritual, and like food, and like all the Samaritans are invited, and yeah.
Right. So I do want to get to some questions. We have 40 minutes left, and I already see by the chat that there's a lot of questions. Also, well, I guess we'll start with, so chat, if you want to ask Abood questions, now's the time. We'll try to get to as many as possible. Of course, we will prioritize super chats. And I'm going to give Abood 50% of all super chats that come in, so we'll be splitting them 50-50. May I regret setting this precedent? Perhaps, but we're going to go for it. Abood's a friend, and I want him to have 50% of the super chats. We have a BBS. A BBS is kind of like Reddit, but built on blockchain. So we have some community members asking questions there. I'm going to post a link to our BBS. Join us. It's kind of like Reddit, but
you
better.
Just say blockchain?
Yeah, it's like Reddit, but built on blockchain. You earn money for creating, for
interesting, like crypto and stuff.
Yeah, there's like a built-in tokenomics that reward content creators and the people who manage the actual BBS. So we have one for Sulha.
Amazing.
Yeah, pretty cool. Let's see. Well, Jordan asks, is there a God?
Is there a what?
Is there a God? You could talk either about your personal belief or just well, I guess Samaritan. We all believe in the same God according to Samaritans, Jews, Muslims, and Christians. That's something we all have in common. The same one
Wow.
God.
I mean, we asked this question on our podcast, Open Peace Podcast, I think 2 weeks ago. Like we ran out of articles to talk about in this segment where we chat about articles, and then I brought up this question. And honestly, it's a hard question because you don't know what would be a satisfying answer. You could just write a whole book about it. But I'll start by what is God for the Samaritans, and then maybe I'll give you also what is God for, like, as my personal opinion. I mean, there's like, let's start with the Samaritans. So the Samaritans do believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They believe that when God created the universe, there was obviously nothing, and then there was light, and that light kind of made you differentiate between things. So that's consciousness. And then he just, like, brought people wisdom through prophets, and like for them to be able to communicate with those people, he brought them in flesh. So that's like how the Samaritan kind of story kind of describes God. And he's like the all encompassing, all loving, all powerful creator who omnipotent also, right? So he's everywhere. That's kind of like the concept of God in the Samaritanism. And I like to also believe that here's the thing. Have you ever saw how Jordan Peterson kind of believes in the Bible? Something like that? Because it's a little bit interesting.
I've seen some of his interpretations, yeah.
Right. So there are a lot of people who don't realize that we don't have to take the Torah literally all the time. There are some stories who are just made like that so that people can understand some kind of truth about reality that otherwise, if you read it literally, you might get lost. And even there might be some other like stories that should be, of course, taken literally to kind of go into the narrative of the story. But here's how I really like to think about God. Okay, I think every human being has God in him. Okay, that doesn't necessarily mean we are God. I'm not saying that. I believe there is something inside us that might be this pure consciousness that is not exactly attached to anything. It's just pure awareness. It's so pure that it's nothing, completely nothing. So I hope I'm not getting too philosophical, but that's what I really like to believe. And this pure, like, awareness is really what is talked about also, I believe, in the Torah, where it's like neshamat chaim, like the breath of God. So the breath of God might be this pure awareness that we're all blessed in. And this pure awareness is also everywhere. I don't believe necessarily that there is a physical universe independent of us. I like to think that everything is consciousness, and our awareness brings that consciousness alive. So it's really hard. I'm trying to put the most valuable words in the shortest amount of time to keep up with the other questions, but I hope I gave a satisfying answer to some, because like I said, you can write a whole book about it.
I'm satisfied, and it looks like chat seems to be satisfied as well, for now at least.
Sure.
So Mordechai is correcting me, saying we don't all believe in the same God, and he's even differentiating between different types of Jews who don't believe in the same God. Theology is by no means my area of expertise, being agnostic and all, but Mordechai, this is new to me. From what I know, that not only do all Jews, but all Christians, Muslims, and Samaritans, we believe in the same God, and then there's different, many other interpretations, but the God is the same. But Mordechai, if you have an interesting source, please share it in chat so we can all see, because I've never heard that before. Cool, some more questions. So Nomad on BBS is asking, put a bunch of questions, we won't be able to get to all of them, unfortunately, but what's the process to convert to being a Samaritan? Is there a conversion process?
First of all, you should know we don't have missionaries, so we don't go around and invite people to become Samaritans. However, because we want to increase our numbers and we want to do it in the safest way possible, like we don't want to get married too close into the community. Of course, the closest you can marry inside the community, according to also the Torah rules, also is your cousin. But even that, we're pretty close to each other. 100 years ago, remember, we were 140. So we tried. And also one more point is that you are not considered a Samaritan from your mother. It's more from both, actually, also from your father. As long as the child, or as long as you follow the Samaritan religion and practice how we practice the Samaritan religion, if your father or your mother, either one, are Samaritans, you qualify to be a Samaritan. So that's one thing. So that means that men in the community can marry women from outside the community. And to point some examples out, we also take from the Torah also that some prophets married non-Israelites. Moses married an Egyptian. And even after the commandments on Mount Sinai happened also. So like Abraham married a non-Hebrew. So, and the line went from their son to their son. So Abraham brought Isaac, brought Jacob. So they're always from the father. So it's different than Judaism, that it was from the mother. I heard the story of when did it start in Judaism to be maternal instead of paternal, meaning from your mother or from your father. But yeah, so why did I mention that? Because we married women from outside the community, and those women have to convert to become Samaritans. And the conversion process, there's no specific ritual that they have to do. There's no like, boom, congratulations, you're a Samaritan. It doesn't happen like that. There's no words you have to say or anything like that. So I believe that I would say the process of conversion is the actual living with the community for the first few months with your soon-to-be husband. I mean, you're not living in the same house or necessarily, you're just living with the family, because here rarely a person lives alone. So you're going to stay with your parents until you get married, and then you leave. That's the norms here until now. So the conversion process is for about 6 to 7 months of living with the community, keeping Shabbat, keeping the traditions, seeing how we, make the purity rituals, eat food, like Ukrainian or like a Christian who never kept Shabbat might find it hard not to touch her phone or his phone for 24 hours or something like that, because we got used to it. Just, overall Shabbat. And of course, the food thing might be a little bit, if you're a Samaritan and you went outside the country, you're pretty much vegan or vegetarian, because you can't eat meat that was not prepared by a Samaritan.
It needs to actually be prepared.
It has to be prepared by a Samaritan, because there are certain...
Does that mean slaughtered by a Samaritan, or actually cooked by a Samaritan after the fact?
Both.
Just to understand. Both. Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
But Judaism, I believe, is not like that, correct? Again, not my area of expertise, but I know the slaughtering process needs to be done by a special person. A prayer needs to be said. There's certain... Interesting.
I didn't know that it should be prepared by a Jewish, maybe, yeah. By Jewish
but I don't know if the food actually, in a kosher restaurant, if the meat needs to be prepared from a Jew. Can one of our audience members provide clarity on that? Because that's quite interesting. I do know when religious Jews travel, they have trouble eating meat because there's just very little kosher meat around. Right. So for yours, the distinction is, I guess as a Samaritan, it's quite harder because there's no like industry of things that have like an OU like kashrut symbol on them, and there's quite a bit fewer Samaritans around the world.
So you
probably don't know much about Samaritan kashrut. Is that what you call it, kashrut? Do you have a different...
We don't have that term in our like culture, but we use it to make people understand what we're talking about. It's just that we even say haram, because in Arabic it just says haram.
Right, that would be the Arabic. Okay.
Right, but we don't necessarily say halal. It's just that we can't eat it. But it just becomes a part of your life. It's not that big of a problem, really. And even we don't have Samaritans living outside, so they just like, you can travel outside for like a week, 2, 3, but then after that, longer than that, people will start asking questions. What's happening? Is he becoming a Buddha or something? That you have to come back eventually to keep the community engaged with you, or like to keep your link alive with the community. So
we have another question here for Mariam Ahmed. Thanks for the question, Mariam. What is Abood's favorite Palestinian food?
It's hard to choose one, actually. If I had to choose one to eat every day, it would probably be mluchia. Do you know about that one?
No, what is that?
It's kind of a plant that they just call it mluchia. I think in Hebrew it's also called mluchia. It's a greenish plant, and they kind of make a soup from it. It's a soup, a chicken soup, but also like the plant. It's a greenish plant, and they make this huge, like it's a big plate of potatoes and chicken and sweet potatoes. It's really delicious. Mluchia would be the answer, but I also like mexi.
Wait.
So with lemon, yes.
No, it almost reminds me of a Yemenite dish.
It might be.
But is it? What's it called? I don't want to mess it up. Yemenites put something called hawayij. No, that's the stuff that smells like amba.
Okay, so the closest would be spinach, spinach to mluchia.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no,
I'm
not quite familiar. I'm not quite familiar with that. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Well, when I come visit, you could take me for.
Oh, you'd love it. We eat it. My family eats it literally every Friday, so that's why I like Fridays. That's one of the few reasons why I like Fridays. Other than that, it's not my favorite day.
Family time is great. Yeah. Let's see. Adi, thanks for the question. Adi says, Abood, do you feel guilty that you live in the company of Palestinians and enjoy more rights than them?
Cool question. How would that make me feel guilty? Let's see. So Palestinians aren't allowed to. Oh, okay. So he's kind of right. He's kind of right. I have a friend who never saw the sea. Literally, she lived here and she never ever saw the sea. And she did actually. The first time ever was like 2 months ago. I think she got a permit or something.
Wow.
To see the sea, and I think it's too much to make a permit just to see the sea. I think it's not fair, you know. So I did feel guilty at that time because I saw how much she liked it, and I was like, whoa. I mean, I have access to the sea literally like just 40 minutes away, but she has to kind of make all those preparations or find her way through, and that would make her anxious about it. So to some points, yeah, I don't know if that's described as a guilt feeling or just feeling bad about it, but
yeah,
I feel I feel empathy for them. So
I think that's an important clarification. People, the term guilty is a tricky one because generally when you say you feel guilty, it's almost like acknowledging wrongdoing when obviously you're not in any way responsible for the privilege that you have. You didn't do anything wrong to be more privileged in that regard. So it's not guilty.
People
it's not guilty.
It might be like guilty might be the word used when they might think that, hey, why did you accept the Israeli ID, right? That's what maybe some people think. Like some people would also say, why did you accept the Palestinian ID? And
as you said, you guys are just acting in your best interest, which is something that all groups generally do, especially when their numbers are
that,
low.
And also the connections with both people. But yeah, you know.
Right. Okay. So yeah, describing it as empathy for the other, I like that framing because guilty does have a different connotation often.
True.
Yeah. Nir Rofe, thanks Nir for the question. What is your vision for peace? We touched on it briefly, but maybe you could just share what you would like to see happen.
Sure. Nir, basically, it's one of the questions that I get asked frequently, and it's also one of the toughest questions because I really don't know what's the one answer for that. There might be some practical things that we can do, but I'll start with this. I think that one steps that we can do is be careful how we raise the next generation, because when someone grows up on a specific belief system or an ideology, it gets super hard to change it when they get bigger, when they get older. That means that if a Palestinian or an Israeli was taught in school that the other side are our enemies, or he wasn't taught that directly, but just like he came up with this influence from the community and from school, because mind you, I learned in Palestinian schools and I saw that they, for example, use the word occupation a lot. I'm not saying whether they should or not. I'm just saying that simply by the fact of using the word occupation, you just grow up knowing that these are like the occupiers, and you just have this belief system in you that these are like the enemies slowly. So it becomes super hard to change when you're older. So what I'm trying to say is we need to at least start with knowing how to raise our next generation in our education systems. And and really like bring them together with Israelis somehow, some way. Like maybe we could have some schools that can like have both Israelis and Palestinian together. That would be awesome if that could happen, because they would grow together, and you'd have like, I mean, that doesn't sound realistic to some people, but that would be one thing that would help a lot. Interacting is, I think, a huge step, because I've seen Palestinians and Israelis who were kind of like going at each other at some point. The short story is like this: we had this cultural night in this workshop for a nonprofit organization, and every group, like the Palestinian group, talked about their culture, and the Israeli group talked about the culture, and they mentioned their cities, and then the Palestinian side mentioned the Israeli city, or I mean, that today you call it Israeli, which is I think it was Haifa or something. So it's basically the Palestinians said that Jaffa is a Palestinian city, so they talked about it as the Palestinian city. So the Israelis, they were like, "Whoa, guys, this is not a Palestinian city anymore. This is an Israeli city." So that what made the Israeli 4 people or something like that kind of like go mad about it. Like, why do you say that? So suddenly we have the 2 groups going at each other. But what I realized was when they were in front of each other, even though they were like going at each other and like electricity was between them, but after a few hours, I swear to God, Adar, you should see them. They were like different at all with each other. They were like really good friends, and it felt like really authentic, you know? So despite them talking about that conflict, it's almost like this energy was just like filtered out. And, you know, okay, just go at each other and say what you feel, and you said this and you say that, but maybe just we need more interaction face to face, and maybe we could do it on Har Gerizim here, you know? Both people feel safe. So these are my 2 points, but yeah, no, it's not an easy. And we have by the way, you can check out our podcast, the Open Peace podcast that I started with like my 2-3 good friends, and we bring guests.
Find a link in the description.
Right, we talk about these subjects. We bring people from different sides, and we're going to bring. It's going to be really interesting. We even have had Adar on it, so check it out. And maybe over there we'll discover what's the real solution. Who knows?
Yeah, amen. Well, I'm going to come visit you. If there's one thing this conversation convinced me of, it's that I'm coming to visit.
Awesome.
We got some clarity from the observant Jews in the audience. They said that, here, we'll pull up Daniel's. Daniel, good to see you here. Adar, Jew has to slaughter and also do much of the post-slaughter ritual like salting, covering blood if it's chicken, etc. But cooking the meal can be done by a Gentile under Jewish supervision. Gentile being An Najah. Yeah. So similar, but it seems like a little bit stricter for Samaritans, that it actually needs to be cooked.
I think that
or supervision is fine.
If he's a worker with you, if he works for you, like in the restaurant, I believe there are exceptions because you taught him. The important thing is you teach him how to do and what to do, because there's like rules for how to deal with the blood, how to deal with like meat, cooked meat, something like that. Just make sure that he knows these rules.
Yeah.
Like, for example, one good example would be not to mix meat with milk. You don't want a chef that doesn't know that, you know. Then he would use the tools that were used for things that contained milk to cook things that contain or that has meat. So we can't mix those two.
Great. Let's get a little bit dramatic. We've been so peaceful the whole time. Maybe we can get a little dramatic.
Sure.
So it's actually funny. So Adi asked the question. Hold on. Adi asked the question about if you feel guilty, which I think is a very good and interesting question. By the way, Adi, from our conversation, he's a right of center Israeli, so he's not a left winger by any means. Mm-hmm. Right of center, but really engaged in getting to know the other side. And then we have Aksay, who I guess is new here. Hi, Aksay. Good to have you here. Aksay responds, Adi, do you feel guilty for forcing Jews and Samaritans under dhimmitud, third-class status for 14 centuries? So I guess Aksay is confusing Adi for a Jewish Zionist who's just empathetic towards the other side. But the reason I'm pulling this up is because it's interesting. It's Adi just really asked a question that shows his empathy as a human. It says nothing about what he views of the conflict, whether he voted for Meretz or Bibi or someone else. It's literally just showing empathy, and it's not surprising because we've been doing this a lot, but showing a little bit of empathy for the other side, how it triggers this like visceral reaction. It's like, how dare them try to show the Palestinian humanity. Often people showing the Palestinian cause are also anti-Israel. So there's kind of like a heuristic there. The second he saw empathy for Palestinians, he recognizes that as like an anti-Israel stance. But yeah, Axie, whoever else is here for the first time, you need to break out of that paradigm. We're doing something different here. We have left-wingers, we have right-wingers, we have people on all sides of the spectrum. The one commonality between us is that we care about the other side. So you're going to hear different narratives on this channel. Don't get offended because somebody cares about the Palestinians. And Palestinians coming here for the first time shouldn't get offended when they see a Palestinian who actually cares about Israelis. That's what we do on this channel. Cool. Yeah, here Adiv incorrect, saying I'm a right-wing Zionist. So Adi, it was a misunderstanding. I agree with you. It's a sign of how people assume things based off like a question that really didn't say much. Okay, more. Okay, this is an interesting one. Jordan, are non-Samaritans allowed to purchase property on Mount Gerizim?
Yeah, they're definitely allowed, because if we don't, first of all, if you can buy the land, no one can say no. And usually we buy them we bought them from the Palestinians. The ones who were here, they were like owned by Palestinians, so we bought them from there. So I don't think Palestinians would mind selling. They might mind selling to Israelis, but you know the point. If they don't mind, it's there's nothing that makes them not buy those lands. So they can definitely buy lands, although we don't have that many non-Samaritan neighbors. We have one big family. It's a father with 3 wives. He brought 20 children. He's a pretty good neighbor. And we have I think 4 or 5 families at the entry of the village. But other than that, the village on Mount Gerizim is pretty much Samaritans. And we wouldn't mind really neighbors coming in from Nablus or from other side.
Cool.
Really. We have actually 2 Finnish people that started living in the community.
Really?
Yeah, they're documented reporters in their 50s, I believe, something like that.
Interesting. Okay, we have a question from fan favorite Starhopper. Good to see you here, Starhopper. So I guess Starhopper asked if you convert to another religion, are you still Samaritan? So I guess this is similar to how Jews are both a people but also a religion. So I don't believe in the Jewish religion. I'm still a Jew. Do Samaritans have something similar to that?
So in the Samaritans, you have to take into account something very important, which is the community. And when I say community, you have to understand that what makes us, for example, not able to live outside the community is probably because of the community, not because of the religion. So the religion never said that you can't live outside. But when you start living outside and you forget that there's a community and you don't come back for the Passover ceremony or the Shabbats, at least for one Shabbat every few weeks, and we have a lot of festivals where you have to be on Mount Gerizim, you will lose your respect kind of in the community. And that is totally up to you. If you feel like you don't want to if you feel like you want to keep Samaritanism by your heart, and if you feel like you won't feel bad about it, it's up to you. The idea is that it's hard to practice Samaritan religion without the community. That's something I don't think you can argue about that, because today we have the Shabbat, which is 7 hours of prayer, which is really hard to do by yourself, really. Right. And other festivals, really. So
finish. Go ahead.
So just continuing the question of, if you convert to another religion, are you still a Samaritan? I think you define that, not the community, because the community, by them, you have left the community. You need to prove that you are keeping the traditions, and you can't prove it if you're staying alone. So they would consider you as a non-Samaritan eventually if you leave the community and you don't come here and practice what you should come to do on An Gerizim. So it's a tricky question.
So technically there is a way to be an atheist Samaritan if you're community oriented, if you're still part of the community and
well, that's a question I get asked
rituals, but you don't
sometimes.
actually believe.
Yeah, that's a question I get asked sometimes. Do we have like seculars in the community? Here's the thing. So imagine a community of Orthodox Jewish people living in, I don't know, like Bnei or something. Bnei, right? If one goes out on the street on Shabbat using his phone, like if a Haredi Jew goes out on Shabbat and uses his phone, don't you think that would be problematic, right? Although he might be secular by himself, but at least he have to keep the traditions, the Shabbat, at least to everyone. So everyone is a keeper for 100%. No one eats non-kosher, like at least for what everyone sees, right? So the collective, all of us are keepers, definitely. So we don't really have seculars, you can say. We probably do. You never know what's inside the person, but everyone as above the surface shows their keeping.
Okay, so that's a clear distinction with Judaism, I would say.
Okay.
Right, because Jews, you could have like no connection whatsoever to the religion.
Right.
And then perhaps this is something that developed in the diaspora, right? It might very much be a result of diaspora living.
I mean, it still didn't happen. There might be some, like we did have 7 or 8 who left the community in the last 100 years. So they
7 or 8 in 100 years?
Yeah. Is that a lot?
No, that's like nothing. You guys have a great retention rate, you could say.
We do. That's not a lot, right? But here's the thing, one of those 7 people or 8 people, I would imagine that they would tell other people, hey, I'm a Samaritan, but like I just left the community. They would still say that, right?
Yeah.
Or they would just say I converted. So who knows?
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. We have a question from Jeremy, and this is kind of a repeat question. We've seen a bunch. Do Palestinians view Samaritans as Jews?
Good question. So there has been some people who are calling us the Palestinian Jews, right? Maybe you heard about it even. Mm-hmm. This is a good question, and it's also sometimes misleading because the word Jewish, like I said, it has its own roots. The word Jewish comes from the tribe of Judah, right? So if you want to go from tribal-wise, we're not from the tribe of Judah. So we don't call ourselves Jewish, in the religion. We just call ourselves the sons of Israel, the Bnei Israel. We don't say that the Jewish people aren't Bnei Israel. That's a different thing. We just don't use the word Jewish because we're not from the tribe of Judah. So it's almost like calling, I don't know, like what could be a good example? It's almost like calling an American. I can't find a good example, but it's just like we don't use the word Jewish because we're not from the tribe of Judah. That's the main reason. However, we are Palestinian Jews, if you want to call us like Jewish, in terms of the ones who have the Torah, the ones who believe in.
Maybe it would be equivalent to calling like a Brazilian American because they're from South America.
Right. That's actually a close one. Yeah. That's pretty close. And you see, the thing is, like, it really depends on if you believe that if you mean by Jewish, the ones who keep the Torah, the ones who believe in the story of the Exodus and all that thing, then yeah, people don't know. Here's the thing. People don't know that there is another version of the Israelites religion that exists. They would say, for example, you would ask, for example, are the Karaim, the Karaim community? Maybe you heard about it, right?
Yeah, they follow the 5 books, right?
True. They only follow the 5 Torahs, the 5 books of Moses. Although their version is also slightly different than the Samaritan Torah. But then again, are they Jewish? You would say yes, you would say no. But like what I'm trying to say is people don't know that there's another version of the Jewish religion out there, like Samaritans. So
well, I found that to be shocking in my research, that it's like, and I read that a lot of the stories are the same, but the interpretation is different. So when it's written in the Jewish Torah about building the temple in Jerusalem, we saw that as following God's wish, and then the Samaritan also reports of the building of the temple in Jerusalem, but you saw it as a mistake that the Judean Jews were making at the time.
Right. You're right.
Fascinating.
So, yeah, and it brings up interesting questions. By the way, like this small story I would like to mention, that might be interesting to the viewers, to see how we're really kind of falling between the conflict and kind of like the two sides. Because my name is Abdallah Cohen. You would assume like, wait, is he a Muslim or is he Jewish? Like Abdallah is obviously an Arabic name. Cohen is a Jewish name. But one time my name really kind of saved me because there's two Israeli soldiers who saw me going out of a Palestinian taxi at night, going to an Israeli area, and they assumed immediately I'm going to do some kind of a terrorist operation. Because like, who does that at night, 9 p.m. and especially at the time where there was like this almost called the Intifada of the knife, right? Like in 2013.
Yeah, the knife Intifada,
like right. So I did that, and that soldier really almost shot me because he was like he was shouting. I will never forget his eyes. The first time ever a gun pointed at me that close.
Wow.
And I was shouting, "Akhi, akol tov, terga, bro, relax, everything's okay. I'm a Samaritan, ani shamoni." Now it's the look on his face obviously showed he never heard this word before, and he started to ask his friend, like, what does that mean? His friend at least removed the gun away and told me, listen, just show me your IDs. And at that time I did not have the Israeli ID. I only had the Palestinian ID, but you can still read it in Hebrew, Abdallah Cohen, which probably confused him even more.
Right.
But like that's the story, and he let me go after like 15 minutes of conversation.
Sorry to hear you went through that. I imagine that could be traumatizing.
It was traumatizing, definitely. I like every time I crossed that road, I remember that incident. But at the same time, it motivated me to talk about the community and let the Israelis know more about us. So thank you for letting me do that.
For sure. I mean, it's been a great pleasure. It's something Israelis and many Jews just aren't aware of. I had a very similar experience to you. It was when I first heard of Open Peace Podcast, or maybe when you joined Telegram. I'm like, Abdallah Abood Cohen didn't make sense. Abood, Arab, Cohen, Jew. Like, who is this guy? What's he all about? And then I heard about the Samaritans, and from there I've just been like researching and looking into it. So yeah, it's been a process, and I think there's a lot of education that still has to be done.
There's really not enough about us in the schools, in school books.
No.
There's like this small did you know one time I saw small did you know box that there is some group that called themselves Samaritans who believe Israel, but that's it. We deserve a lesson. We should sign up a petition for that.
Yeah, for sure. Mandatory in schools. You have time for a few more questions?
Sure.
Cool. So Daniel Edelstein goes, how is the Arabic of Samaritans in Hulon?
It's pretty good. It's not as good as ours, but I would say we speak Hebrew better than they speak Arabic, that's for sure. But that's because we go to work in Israel more than they don't work in Palestinian cities. However, because we are always in contact with them, they come to the mountain a lot because there's like festivals that you can only do in Mount Gerizim here. So we interact with them sometimes in Arabic, and naturally also they just find a way. Some of them, I assume, have stronger Arabic than others, but overall they understand it pretty well. So they would get along more than the average Israeli.
Right. And they learn at home? Is that what's happening?
No, they don't really learn it officially at home, but they might like watch some Palestinian shows here and there, hear some Palestinian music or like Arabic music, or they might just, like I said, I think the most important factor is that they're in contact with us and we speak first. Right. So when they come here, we sometimes speak Arabic and force them to speak Arabic, and sometimes it's the opposite way around.
Cool. Brothers, sisters, family. Yeah. It's interesting ties because, again, just in a like geographical location, not so far away, but on separate sides of borders. So it's interesting to see developmental differences and how you still stay in touch and support one another.
True.
Gonzo Moods asks, how would you describe your relationship with the Druze population?
Cool. I don't think there is a specific relationship, but I think it would be like as good as like any Israelis. We don't have a specific one. I think I did. Oh, I did have a student who was from the Druze community, maybe even two, that I taught for a couple month English, and he taught me a little bit about their traditions. But other than that, there is no specific relationship. It would be like as good as both sides. We're really friendly with all sides, really. So
cool. Maybe we'll take this last question. Daniel Edelstein asks, how many times a day Samaritans are meant to pray, and at what times? I think Daniel's trying to see how it aligns with Jewish practice.
Sure. We have both. We have morning and evening prayers, so both are like around, say, 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes. But those are not mandatory, you would say, because the ones who are mandatory are the Shabbat ones. So I'm not the one who decided if they're mandatory or not. I'm just saying usually the younger generation doesn't practice the morning and evening prayers. But on Shabbat, I think that's because they believe that they do enough on Shabbat. Because on Shabbat, 7 hours of prayer, and everyone has to come.
There's 7 hours of prayer every Shabbat?
Yeah, but they're split around. They're like scattered around the 24 hours. So there's 1 hour at the entry of Shabbat, where we go and just turn off everything in the house, just keep a few things on, like the bathroom and like maybe the living room a little bit, like a small light, and then go and head to the synagogue. Men only pray in the synagogue and women pray at home, although in festivals women also join us. And we go back after that 1 hour and sit with the family and just have some tea and cakes. We don't have the kiddush, by the way, so we don't have this ceremony of the kiddush with the wine. So we just sit, eat some delicious food, chat about the weekend, what's happening, who's getting married, who's getting engaged, who's traveling. It's just, you talk about all those things. That's why it's hard to keep secrets in this community, and that's why some privacy wise it can be a little bit challenging because of these talks on Shabbat probably. But we have also 3 hours of prayer from 3 a.m. in the morning. So that's like Saturday morning. You go 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. And funny enough, last Saturday, I slept at my grandparents' house, and he woke me up. And then I was like, I'm sure the prayer didn't start. He woke me up, I think, with like a little bit of like half an hour before. He didn't see the hour. He didn't see the clock. My grandfather made a small mistake. I went there and I didn't see anyone. Like literally at 3 a.m. It was dark at night. So 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. We have this prayer for 3 hours. And mind you that it's not like you're not focusing for 3 hours, and you don't have to kind of like not talk. You can just relax. The chants are amazing. They're very meditative. They make you feel good. There's also you can go home and like just like maybe if you need the bathroom or drink something, and just come back. It just becomes part of your life, really. And by the time the prayer finishes, we have from 6 to 7 the Parashat HaShavua. So like the weekly portion of the Torah is read by the family, one by one. So everyone has their own portion. So it kind of goes in a circle. And then we have the beautiful Samaritan breakfast. I say Samaritan breakfast because it's like that's what most Samaritans eat, which is tahini. If you like tahini, by the way, do check out tahini har bracha.
Wait, is that all you eat? Just
no, it's tahini mixed with things. So you have like tahini with like eggplants or avocado or sweet potatoes or potato, like different, like maybe 9 dishes or something like that, with the Samaritan arak.
With arak.
Well, yeah, 7 a.m. arak. Have you ever tried it? It's crazy, but we sleep after for like 5 hours.
In the morning. Not bragging.
It's crazy, but when you
proud of it, but yeah,
Yeah, but when you wake up at 3 a.m., it's almost like it's not morning.
That's true.
Yet,
That's true.
And we sleep 5 or 4 hours after that. It's the best nap of the
So
week.
3 to 6, and then a nice nap.
And then 12 a.m. is like 2 hours. then go back to the family, sit with the family. Everyone's chatting, no one's on their phones. That's what's kind of brings us back to the old days. Excuse me. And then we have half an hour at the exit of Shabbat. So that's how Shabbat finishes.
Amazing. I'm gonna come experience that.
You're more than welcome, Adar, for sure.
It's funny.
And
We
I'll
have
prepare some tahini. Sure.
Yeah. I love tahina. I guess I'll eat it in the morning if I'm having like what we call an Israeli breakfast, which is just a bunch of different like salads and
Hummus,
mezetim,
maybe.
like small.
Okay.
Less so hummus. I do know that many Middle Eastern countries will have like hummus ful for breakfast. We do that less, but we'll have like it's not uncommon to have like eggs, but then also like a lot of different smaller salads that you'll have, and like
Yogurt probably with
the salat katsutz, which is known abroad often as Israeli salad or Arabic salad, which is what we're more likely to call it here, salat arabi or salat katsutz. You'll eat that with tahina. So yeah, we do.
Well, you should really try avocado with tahini if you're looking for a delicious and very healthy.
I actually am against that. I'm against tahina avocado mix. Yeah, I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Because avocado with salt on a piece of bread. I mean, you could add a tomato. Tomato's pretty neutral, and the acid of the tomato adds something.
Okay.
But avocado with salt is one of the best tasting things imaginable. Like, it's mind-blowingly amazing.
Okay.
And I feel like tahina dilutes the flavor of the avocado. So I have done that mix before, but I always tell myself, I'm like, you know what? I don't think it tastes better than just avocado.
But when you mixed it, did it look like avocado with tahini, or did it look like a green hummus? Because you have to mix it.
Oh, you're saying actually blend them together.
You actually blend them together, so you have a green hummus. Really, it's really
okay.
Good. Try that.
Look,
because I tried what you mean. It wasn't that good, but when you mix them and crush them together,
when you actually mix it, interesting.
Lemon and salt, and then you'll be satisfied.
We have a green tahina that is done with like a lot of cilantro and sometimes other herbs. That's what our green tahina is. But you're saying actually mix the two and have it be like a creamy. Okay, I'll do it. Avocado. Sure. It's not avocado season now, but in a few months I'll let you know how.
Awesome.
How it went.
I'm excited for that. We love sushi here in Samaritans, by the way. So
sushi.
We love it here.
So sushi is like interesting because it's obviously not a regional food, and 10, 15 years ago in Israel, at least, it wasn't hard. It was hard to find sushi, and definitely not good sushi. Now, from what I read, Israel has the most sushi per capita. Second most sushi per capita after Japan.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Per capita, but that's still a lot. Wow.
Per capita, yeah. We really took it. We went to town with it. And recently, I've seen a trend in Thai food. Actually, I've seen a lot of Thai restaurants open up. Yeah. So we had something funny happen in chat. We have shout out to Joseph Cohen from Israel Advocacy Movement. So he's here in the chat. His name is Joseph Cohen. So a Palestinian friend of ours.
Oh yeah, I was on his channel once, Joseph.
Oh, you were on his channel. So they're asking if you two are related, both being Cohens.
I think that if you want to go genetically, we are probably related because the Samaritan Cohens were thought once that they were like not really Cohens, but after a DNA study, which you can look, by the way, on Google, you can find it. Search for Samaritan Cohen gene, something like that. You'll find it. I think it's either J1 or E1B1, something like that. And it turned out that Samaritan Cohens are related to the Cohens around the world. That's really interesting, right? You can check out the study and check it out and just come out with your own conclusions, but we probably might be related, sure.
Way back when, yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Cool, I think that's it in terms of questions. We are a little bit over our hour and a half time.
No worries. If there's any more that are waiting for him, I'm here.
No, I think let's see. One of the hardest things is listening to what you're saying and also finding questions at the same time.
I know what you mean. Yeah. If there's anything I missed, I think it would be like in terms of like showing the Samaritan Hebrew a little bit, I think that's worth it. Samaritan ancient Hebrew. Just check it out and just show you like really important things I think people should check, right? If you allow me to share my screen.
Yeah, sure. Let's do it. And then we can give you some final words, final thoughts.
So this is the Samaritan Hebrew. I'm trying to normally it should increase by itself, but okay. So do you see it? Is it big enough? Oops, sorry. Let's go and check into this one. There we go. So this is Samaritan Hebrew. This is Aleph, Beat, Gimel. You can read how we pronounce them. So Aleph in Hebrew would say Alaf, and Beat is also Beat. Bet, sorry, is Beat. And what's interesting is you can see the difference here between the Samaritan Hebrew and under it the Jewish Hebrew, known as also Assyrian Hebrew. Right. Samaritan alphabet is also known as Paleo Hebrew. And you can see like some words are still the same a little bit, like Sheen is kind of like the Jewish Sheen. By the way, Sheen means teeth, so you can see it resembles human teeth a little bit, right? Shinayim. Or for example, in. What does ayin mean in Hebrew?
Right? Eye.
It's an eye. So you can see it also resembles an eye here. Yeah. Although the Assyrian or the Jewish Hebrew stopped using that version of it. We have, for example, another example would be Rosh. What does Rosh mean? Rish, sorry. We say Rish, but it also means Rosh in Hebrew or in ancient Hebrew, which is head. So you can see it resembles like the head over here, right? And if we want to say in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth in Samaritan Hebrew, well, in Jewish Hebrew we would say Barashit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. In Samaritan Hebrew we would say Barashit bara Elohim et hashamim with aretz. Okay? And one more thing I think is also worth mentioning. We believe we have the oldest Torah scroll in the world. Not book, but scroll. And we believe it was written by the third high priest in the Holy Land. His name was Abisha. So if you search for Samaritan Abisha scroll, I believe you can find a photo of it. Yeah, that's it. So that's the scroll, and we believe it's written on a animal parchment, and it was passed down from generation to generation. It's not obviously in the best condition. Some people would assume like there's no way that it would survive 3,000 years old. That's a good argument, I think. We don't necessarily believe that there are the same pages since 3,000 years, because maybe every time there was a paper that was, that just got disintegrated, we just replaced that same paper. But we only bring it out 3 times each year, and we only keep it in the safe. So only bring it out of the safe 3 times a year. And here's the thing. A lot of people got to know about it, and about 40, 50 years ago, some people had the idea of, it would be a good auction, item. I think that's what they probably thought, and they tried to steal it from the safe. Lucky for us, they couldn't break into the safe, kind of thieves or something. They couldn't break into the safe, but they could steal 2 of our oldest Torah scrolls. One is about 600 years old, and one is about 800 years old. And we were contacted also. We contacted them to somehow, I think they contacted us. They tried to sell it for us. Imagine that. Like they stole it, and then they kind of proposed to buy it for us, sell it for us. And I think they asked for about $1 million. And the debates are still going how to get them back. And there was a museum in America who even proposed to buy it for us under one condition, that they keep it in the museum and only bring it to us 3 times a year, which is like in the festivals. But we couldn't.
So it's like them saying, we'll buy it, we keep it, but technically it's yours.
Yeah, it's just not. It was not accepted. You can see here also the Samaritan women come to pray on this Abisha scroll. So like they just take the blessings from it. It's the most valuable item we have. So.
Wow. Fascinating.
And as you can see, it looks kind of also pretty similar to the Jewish version of the Torah, but this is used only for blessings, not for reading. So the Chazan, the Kantor, would open it up and then lift it right and left, but not free. We don't read from it usually. So And by the way, do you know what a mezuzah? Of course, you know what a mezuzah is, but did you ever see a Samaritan mezuzah?
No.
Like in the Jewish traditions, they have it in the small wooden, like kind of box, right, on the
Yeah, I
entry of
can
the
maybe
house,
get one. Hold on.
right? So, sure.
This is a Jewish mezuzah.
Right.
Yeah. Just and then there's a scroll in here.
Right, inside it. And it usually contains the Shema, right? The Hero Israel. So this is how the Samaritan mezuzah looks like. It's pretty much engraved on a piece of stone and put on the entry of the house. So you can like have any kind of verse from the Torah you want. And this is put on above the door or next to the door.
Is that just one per house, or
Sorry?
or is it next to? Is there something like that? It's like a plaque. There's a plaque in each door, above each door,
yeah,
or just
exactly.
one on the house?
Above each door, above one of the entry of the door of the house. Sorry, so above the entry of the house. So like just the door of the house. You can put it above the door, right, on the left.
So it would be interesting to look into how this became the Jewish mezuzah. This could also be a diaspora creation, because maybe you wanted to be a little more discreet in your belief when we're in the diaspora. So we did something subtle.
True.
Instead of
announcing so that you don't show your identity as much. Right. This is also very interesting, by the way. This is a piece, like here on the right. This is a small piece of what was found in the Qumran scrolls, the Dead Sea Scrolls. So we know that there are some differences between the Samaritan and Jewish Torah, and it was believed for a lot of years that the Samaritan Torah was just another, just kind of like evolved from the Masoretic text. That was what was believed. But then we discovered, like the scientists and like researchers discovered in Qumran a scroll which had a version of the Samaritan Torah as old as 2,000 years old, 2,400 years old, I believe, or maybe even a little bit less than that. But you can search for it, Samaritan, maybe Samaritan version of the Torah in the Dead Sea Scrolls, something like that. It's a beautiful piece of, like, they found it in infrared. So the verse says, "And you shall build an altar on Mount Gerizim." And what happened is really that they found that this is today not found in the Masoretic text. So that's the thing. So they didn't know that the Samaritan Torah was that old, at least. So this is also written in Assyrian Hebrew, by the way, but it contains what the Samaritan Ten Commandments contains today, and not the Masoretic text. So that's something you could also check out.
Isn't it right that what they think to be the case is there wasn't one original text and then deviations of that text, but there were different similar texts by different groups of Israelites that slowly
you have the Masoretic, you have the Dead Sea Scrolls, you have the Qumrans, like, you have the Samaritan version of it. There's even, I believe there is another version of it. I forgot what's the name of it, but you're right in that regards. I heard about it. Here's the high priest. About 100 years ago, we have a high priest. Today he's my grandfather. We choose the high priest based on age, the oldest of the Cohen family that lives on Mount Gerizim. So if maybe you'll come back. He's your
grandfather?
Today he's my grandfather, yes.
Wow.
But that doesn't mean I'm in line. I mean, I am in line, but not because he's my grandfather. I'm in line simply because I'm a Cohen that lives on Har Gerizim. So maybe in like 40, 50 years, I'll be the high priest.
Okay.
Who knows? It's just based if I will live in it long enough.
Don't forget me when you get your high priest.
Oh no problem. I'll give you the priestly blessing, priestly blessings. So yeah, these are the things that I wanted to share. I guess there's probably more, but I invite everyone to come to Mount Gerizim, have a look for yourself. You love this place. It's pretty safe to come here. A lot of people ask if it's not. So it's pretty safe.
Well, I'm gonna come visit you. Maybe we'll even do a live stream together in person. I think that could be cool.
Cool idea. Yeah, for sure.
I think we've just only scratched the surface. There are some more questions. A bunch of them are a whole new can of worms that I don't know if we want to get into now. But we could just agree to set up another session and take a deep dive into some new topics that we didn't touch on today.
I would love to. I would love to, for sure.
Awesome. So, for
Although I
friends
do want to
watch,
see, want to mention this question. What does he mean, Ari? Here, what do you mean by how does he feel to be a blue blood? What does that mean? I'm not sure.
Ari Garinash, Abood, how does it feel to be a blue? Yeah,
Blue blood.
interesting.
Okay, I'm trying to see. Does he mean Israeli or does he mean like ethnically? I don't know.
I guess we'll find out. We could wait.
Okay, sure.
Friends, if you want, you could get in touch with Abood. His contact information is in the description. You can also find a link to the Open Peace podcast. That's his podcast.
Follow us there.
Him and some friends who have also been on the show in the past are doing awesome work. They're also trying to have Israelis and Palestinians engage in conversation. Their mission is similar to ours, so I very much suggest that you get that link and follow them.
Yeah, and check out also if you want to see the documentary. Search for Abood Cohen on YouTube. There's a 50-minute documentary you can watch.
Yeah. Let's even put a link in the chat. Have a link to that if anyone wants to.
Yeah. I'll send it in a second here.
Okay. So a blue blood just means royalty. So yeah, Abood Cohen is a blue blood.
Sure.
Yeah, that's funny.
Here, I searched it. Oh, that's a click. Okay, it's like it's from our Open Peace podcast. Did I search? Yeah.
But we wanted to put your YouTube video, which is like a documentary.
That's the documentary. Yeah, that's the documentary.
Oh,
that's
here
the
I
link for
found
the
it.
documentary.
I found it. Here, hold on. Boom. Okay. Cool. We're gonna friends watching. If you want to do an after party in the lounge on Discord, we could do that. Abood, I don't know if you want to join or if your time is up.
Today, you mean? Yeah, I'll have to be in a place now, but I would love to
another time. But I'm sure Thursday evenings, that's when we do our after party. So anyone who wants to do an after party, join our Discord. I just shared a link on the left-hand side. It says lounge, click lounge, and you'll be connected. And Abood, it was so great having you.
Thank you. Yeah, I had a blast.
Yeah, I do plan on coming to visit sometime soon. So
you're more than welcome. I'll make sure the tahini is ready.
Yeah, I want that avocado tahini. Yep, very much so. Yeah, and any final words you want to leave our audience with?
I haven't thought of any final words, but I would say that, like, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I love questions, and I think that we, like some people might think that we are biased toward this group or that group. I assure you, we really authentically want peace between the two nations, just for the simple fact that we love both nations and we care about both friends. I have really good friends from both sides, so we genuinely want to be a bridge of peace between both sides. So help us do that by maybe spread the story of the Samaritans and show the people how, as Samaritans who were like considered Israelites, we're getting along super well with both nations. Why can't everyone do that? So
amen, brother. Very well said.
Thank you.
Signing out, friends. Until next time.
Bye-bye.